And all right, so we are live, and I need to bring up this. Here we go. Okay, well, Kufar Akbar, everybody, welcome to another edition of the Cross and the Crescent discussion group. This is no longer a blog talk radio program dedicated right to dividing the truth between Christianity and Islam. I am one of your hosts here, Eric Thekeford, broadcasting to you live from the depths of the cavernous cave here in Dar al-Harb, Kafiristan. And I'm watching the mother of my children celebrate Mother's Day by mowing my lawn. What kind of cold-hearted man would do that? But I always beat her to we both enjoy mowing the lawn, and so she's out there. Oh no, she's got my grandson on that zero turn. That's not safe. He's only 10. No wonder why all the Anyway, okay, so all you mothers out there, happy Mother's Day to you. Thank you for all you do for your children, our children. And raise them up in a godly way. The church service this morning, we have an interim pastor. Somebody came in and preached this morning because our pastor left, and we're in the process of looking for a new pastor. But besides that, he preached a really interesting sermon this morning about that this is the toughest day of the year for a lot of women out there, because there's a lot of women out there that simply cannot have children, or women that have had children and lost children, or have wayward children. So he brought out all of these things that we should celebrate motherhood, but also be compassionate upon and show compassion to those mothers out there who have suffered loss, that have not or don't have the ability to become mothers, and lift them up. So we should. That was kind of an interesting perspective that we had this morning. It wasn't like he was being Debbie Downer or anything, and saying, "Well, you guys should feel good about your mom because, well, she had it easy." But anyway, it was a good sermon. Also, if you have not yet had the chance, Tuesday morning, I did a live stream with Bob the Builder from Speaker's Corner, and it was absolutely a blast. It was just a lot of fun. We took some videos from Hamza Mayet over there from where he talks on Speaker's Corner, and we let this guy have it. And it was just a lot. And what we did was we illustrated the abject dishonesty that this guy and many people like him engage in when providing criticisms of Christianity. And here's the best one. Everybody open up their Bible to Genesis chapter 40, verse 1. If you have it available, open it up to Genesis chapter 40, verse 1. So here he is. He has a whole video on hammering this Jewish gentleman. And he's saying, here's a miracle of the Quran, where there was a time period in history where the Pharaoh of Egypt was not called the Pharaoh. He was called the king. Now, how did Muhammad ever know that the Pharaoh at some point in time would be called king when in your Bible he's always referred to as Pharaoh, despite the fact that there was a time period in history when the Pharaoh was not called the Pharaoh, he was called the king? Does he read hieroglyphics? So he's hammering this guy. Did anybody bring up Genesis chapter 40, verse 1?
Yeah, it's up here.
Yeah,
On private.
All right, go ahead and read that for me, one of y'all. I don't care which one.
And it came to pass after these things that the butler of the king of Egypt and his baker had offended their lord, the
butler
king of Egypt.
The what of
The
Egypt?
king
The what?
of Egypt.
I thought this was a miracle. This is a miracle, don't you? So this is one of the many miracles that Hamza has tried to beat somebody over the head with. And say, well, how can you prove this? I mean, this is so. This it has no. How can he know? He couldn't have possibly known this. Well, if you hang out with the Jews long enough, homie, you're going to learn some things, and that's what he did. That's exactly where he got it.
Yeah, wasn't he confirming the Torah and the gospel?
He was supposed to be. You would have thought. But anyway, if you want to go and watch that video, that's just one of the examples that we had a really good time. And he's agreed to come to the channel and do some videos in the future. But one of the ones that we brought up was Deuteronomy 18:18 that we didn't get a chance to. Address 157, where Muhammad says, "You're going to find me in your Bible."
You know, if you go and read Deuteronomy 15, that will completely blow Islam up.
The chapter 15 or verse 15?
Yes.
Okay.
No, the chapter 15. Right. That will blow Islam up big time.
Why is that, Ed? Don't leave us in suspense. You can't do that.
Yeah, you got to read the chapter. You'll understand.
I mean,
can you provide a summary, please?
That blows him up too. Yeah, you're right.
Can we summarize the chapter? Or do I have to pull it?
Hold on.
Do I got to pull it up? Okay, if you're going to make me do this, no problem.
I
got it. No problem. Deuteronomy 15, chapter 15, the sabbatical year.
Yeah.
Okay. At the end of every 7 years, you should grant a release, and at this manner of the release, every creditor shall release. Oh, this is the year of Jubilee. Is that what this is talking about? Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Of a foreigner, you may exact it, but whatever is yours is your brother. What am I looking for here?
Yeah. See, of this and every manner of the release, every creditor that lendeth aught unto his neighbor shall release it. He shall not exact it of his neighbor or of his brother, because it is called the Lord's release. Of a foreigner thou mayest exact it again, but that which is thine with thy brother, thine hand shall release.
So they can't hold on to anything they've taken.
Exactly. Boom.
Game over.
So give up on Israel, people.
All right. So today we're going to be, what are we doing today? Today, I got to bring up the comments. Holy cow, I got 31 comments already. Holy cow. I'm sorry, folks. I'm not paying attention there in chat. Okay. So today what we're going to be talking about is handling common Islamic objections. And I'm talking about the most common. Where did Jesus say, I am God worship? We're going to handle that. And there's a few other ones that we're going to handle. And what prompted this is I'm thinking Rad needs to be like my producer or something along those lines, because if you ask the guy for ideas for this show, he's Johnny on the spot. He comes up with these ideas right off the top of his head. And he says, well, let's just do common Muslim objections. And so what do? I go in one direction. And what does he do? Well, he goes in the exact opposite direction. So what I'm going to let him do here in the first couple minutes of the show, because he evidently has a life and has something going on here on Mother's Day. I'm assuming it has something to do with food. But with that said,
probably halal food, right? Like pork.
It's the halal, the halal pulled pork that he consumes. Yeah. We're going to allow him to go first. So a lot of this, of course, stems from that freshman level doctoral students debate review, and I'll let him handle it from here.
All right, can you guys hear me?
No.
Yes.
Oh, that's good.
I can
hear you.
Well, just to let you know, the direction that I go in is always the right direction, because I always stay right at the fork. I'm just saying, okay? So let you know.
What direction do you go with the spoon?
No, I never take the spoon. But just to let you know, we can agree to disagree as long as that you agree that I am always right. We shall get along swimmingly. But no, I'm going to share my screen here because I got to play this small clip. I call this the Camel Dookie because Jamal Dookie is his name, and Jamal is camel. He laid a big dookie.
No. Where did you get this guy's last name?
In the email, it says Dookie. Look at the email thread.
It does
His name's
not.
Dookie. It does too. Well, that's how I read it. So
it's Jam.
Well, either way, he laid a definite do jam on this one.
Okay,
I like
all
Dookie
right.
better.
All right.
I actually emailed the dude, okay, respectfully. So he may be watching, Jamal. If you want to come on, I don't know. I think Eric may let you, but you have to be a decent person. And you can't be insulting, like calling people, swine of the humankind and all that stuff. You can be harsh with us, as you say, but you can't threaten us with violence. I'm just saying. Those are the rules. But yeah, so I sent him an email, and I sent him an email asking him, do you have any of these? I'm going to be discussing, these verses. Do you have any other verses that you would like me to discuss? And he responds, "It's funny how you Christians will dispute about the marriage of prophet blah blah, but you don't know your own Bible. What you people need to do is focus more on your own Bible rather than the Quran or the life of the prophet. Then maybe you would know what I was referring to. Yeah, prove my point. Christians don't know their own Bible. I'm asking for other verses. Anyway, otherwise you would know exactly what I was referring to. But anyway, let's get into
That's called a red herring.
Right, let's get into what he said. Let me find you here. What did I do with you? You know what? Let me close that out. Okay. Share screen. Present.
Do not see it.
Share screen. And we're going with Dookie's Camel. Share tab audio. There you go. All right, we'll make it big for you guys. Give her a listen. Here we go.
I'd like to ask a question. Now, everybody keeps talking about Aisha radiallahu anha and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's marriage. Has anybody ever questioned the Bible where it says that David shagged Abishag? Yeah, David shagged Abishag, and she was a nara. According to the Bible, she was a nara. A nara means a pre-pubescent girl. Now, all you Christians who are out there trying to, point fingers at the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, have you ever questioned what a nara is, first of all? Because most of the Christians don't speak Hebrew. Most of the Christians don't speak Greek. All they know is the English versions and, what they've got. Have you ever questioned how old, what's her name was, Abishag, when she was shagged, according to your book, by, what's her name, by David? So if you're putting the emphasis on the marriage of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Aisha radiallahu anha, whether it was ethical or not, go into your own books and see. Because when Brother Kenny mentioned about the issue of Rebecca being 3 years old or whatever.
All right, I'm going to stop it there. We'll get to Rebecca if we've got time. Let me stop sharing my screen.
Dude.
What?
Nowhere in the Bible does it say that Rebecca was 3 years old.
Right. Yeah. We'll get to that. We'll get to that in a second. What I want to focus on is saying that David shagged Abishag first. Yeah. And secondly, that the word nada, or whatever he said the word was, Hebrew, because he's a Hebrew scholar, he doesn't understand Hebrew, but neither do I. That's fine. But he definitely doesn't understand. Means prepubescent girl. None of those things are true. Like I said, this is definitely a camel dookie. He laid a big turd. I'm just saying, okay? This is a big-time dookie, and it stinks. But anyway, so let me share my screen again. You know what? Because I got all these Bible verses, so can I just share, like, in a whole window?
I don't know what you're talking about, but if you think you can, go ahead.
I can share the whole window. Yeah, let me do that. Let me make sure there's nothing. Let me just close this. Hold on.
Don't list which jail you're residing in.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah.
We don't want that getting out.
The most insulting thing about that false accusation is not so much. Well, the most insulting thing was that yes, he definitely compared me to his prophet, to Muhammad. But two, okay, the second insulting thing is he actually thought that I would ever lower myself to be in a state prison. I'm a federal guy. I'm a federal crimes guy. Okay, I don't do the petty state prison stuff. Okay, I'm just saying. Anyway, so yeah, let me share the window here. I guess we got everything. We're good. Okay. All right, go ahead. I'm sharing it. You see it? Okay, so let's get off of that. So the verse he's talking about is found in 1 Samuel 18:27. No, that's actually not it. It is in 1 Kings, okay? Now David was old and stricken in years, and they covered him with clothes, but he got no heat. Wherefore his servant said unto him, let there be sought for my lord the king a young virgin. Now, he thinks this means, because clearly in the Muslim mind, if you're preteen, you're the only virgin there is, okay? Because you've already been snatched and cherry-picked. I'm just saying, okay? All right? Now, this goes to his mind thinking. This really does. Honestly, if you are over 9 years of age, you clearly cannot be a virgin anymore because some Muslim man snatched you up. That's all I'm saying. There's the only way you can come to this conclusion. But when the king a young virgin, and let her stand before the king, and let her cherish him, and let her lie in thy bosom, that my lord the king may get heat. So they sought for a damsel throughout all the coasts of Israel, and found Abishag, a Shunammite, and brought her to the king. And the damsel was very fair and cherished. The word damsel is the one he's referring to, I believe, but we'll look it up. And cherished the king, and ministered to him. But the king, what? What does that say? I'm going to highlight it.
Knew her not.
Knew her not. What does that mean in biblical terms when they say that a man does not know a girl?
He did not
have a physical relationship.
No sexual intercourse, right?
Intercourse, absolutely.
Well, okay. So this is a problematic verse according to this Muslim, but I'm going to solve this verse for him using the logic of Ken Islam. Okay. First of all, the Bible, okay, we can just take verses and throw them out, can't we? We can just say we don't like that, we moved on. We can just sit there and say, well, yes, it was written by men. And I mean, seriously, listen, this is 1 Kings. Remember, 1 King was written in Judea. Chronicles was written in Israel. The Jews, they were lying about each other clearly. And that's just a fact, right? We can do that, right? Doesn't that make sense?
Okay, let's make sure we understand what Rad's pointing to here. He's pointing to the fact that this was an argument that Kenny made during his debate with David Wood. That what he was saying that the Muslims in Iraq, were writing against. It was basically the empires, the Abbasids and the what's the other one begins. The Umayyads, the Umayyads and the Abbasids. Okay, so they're writing politically and polemically against one another, and developing and coming up with this hadith. This is the argument that Kenny was using, and he says that therefore we can throw out this because it appears to be polemical in nature.
Right. So we can do this here, right? If we have a problem with it, we can just ignore it. We can just throw it out. We can say, oh yeah, we can find various scholars that disagree on it. And let's face it. We wasn't there. None of us was there. The only people that were there were King David, and he was old, and this young damsel, right? Okay, so yeah, we can throw that. Oh, and by the way, but the king knew her not. I know you Christians all like to say biblically that means he did not know her sexually. No, this just simply means he didn't know who she was because he was an old man. Okay, so he thought that was someone else, clearly. Just like consummate. Consummate really doesn't mean, whatever.
Okay, let me ask you a question. Let me just ask a real quick question here to provide some context to this. Okay, so here you have a man who's old, dying, and his body's not able to produce enough heat to keep him comfortable. So the first thing that's on his mind, of course, is to engage in sexual intercourse with some prepubescent little girl. This is the thinking that these guys
Exactly.
want you to ascribe to. This is the type of thinking that they themselves engage in and expect everybody else to be perverted scumbags like them. That's just, it's sick the way that they come up with these kind of things.
Exactly.
Paul, you wanted to share your screen for a second?
Yes.
What are we looking at here?
I'm picking up the word that he used, na'ara. So this is the word na'ara. And I'm having a good laugh here. So if we scroll down a little bit, I just want to show you the Hebrew etymology. And
oh, you brought it up. Yeah,
how
I was doing it. Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. So 16 times the word is used as damsel. 34 times it's used as damsel. 16 times it's used as maiden. 7 times as maid. 4 is young. And another time as young woman. Notice there is no little, it's not little girl. They're not talking about a little girl at all. They're talking about a woman. Yeah, they're not talking about somebody who's 6 years old. They're talking about a woman who is through puberty. Yes.
Marriageable. Look at that. Marriageable young woman, concubine, and or prostitute. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. In the case of David, they looked for someone who was of marriageable age, who could sleep with the king, who was likely to perform or do anything because of his age, and he was unable. He needed to be kept warm, and what could they do besides put coals in the bed to keep him warm? And that would probably burn him because he wouldn't. I mean, he's just an old man at that point, and yeah. And actually, if you're familiar with older men, that's exactly, they do need that extra heat. So yeah,
actually, that is actually a common thing. It's even still used. Well, now they actually use, like, they would use like a water bottle or something like that. But no, back in the day before we had all this stuff, that was the deal. Another human being would lie with the person to keep them warm. There was no sexual contact.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Because they were freezing to death. Okay, and this is what you do. You share your body heat. This is a thing. I mean, I'm not even talking in survival mode. I'm just talking people in old age like this. This is what would happen.
I want to share something with you that's a little, anyway, when I was in the Army, one of the ways that when I went to a pre-Ranger school, it's kind of like a school that gets the HUAs ready to go to, I never wanted to go to Ranger school, but anyway, one of the things that they would teach you to do is spoon. We never had to do it, just saying, because frankly, it was warm enough when I went through this training. But if you get cold enough, this is one of the things that they teach you to do. And the reason why is because when you share body heat, you're conserving your heat and conserving your energy, and you're able to endure much greater coldnesses than you could otherwise. So this is just an old, archaic way of doing exactly what you guys are talking about. And we even train our soldiers to do it today.
So basically, yeah, he laid a big dookie there, definitely. That's just showing his ignorance. Not only that, not only the Hebrew, but also the Bible verse in question. But like I said, I did email him asking him for other verses that he wanted me to discuss. Because it's funny, because he's done this before. And when they used to let me on the streams, he would say, "Why don't you talk about this?" And I'd say, "That's great. Let's talk about this." And I start talking about this, and then Kenny would kick me backstage. And then Jamal and Kim will say, "See, they don't want to talk about this. All they want to talk about is, you know." I'm like, dude, I'm willing to talk about this. You know what I mean? Anyway, but I want to talk about some other verses that I think Christians have. But so let's just be clear. We don't have to throw this verse out. We don't have to sit there and say we weren't there, nobody was there, only 2 people that were there, only 2 people that are going on. We don't have to redefine terms. We don't have to do any of that stuff. The verse stands on its own. And okay,
that's very well on its own.
So in other words, the dude picked the wrong verse to pick on us. He literally picked the wrong verse to pick on us. But let's go with some other verses, because I like David, okay? Because David's my hero. David actually is a super duper badass paratrooper, okay? He really is. No, this dude, I mean, seriously, I mean, but let's read those. Now, think about this. You know what I mean? I mean, you know, Eric, you're a super duper badass paratrooper, right? When you propose to your wife, not anymore. Yes, you were.
That whole broke down, man.
But when you propose to your wife, did you give her a wedding ring? I mean, not a wedding ring, but a engagement ring or whatever.
Ring.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
On private's pay also.
Yeah. So you're not a super duper badass paratrooper. Let's go with. Can you share my screen? Let's go with David. This is what a super duper badass paratrooper does. This is OG. He's OG. David. This is 1 Samuel 18:27. David arose and went out along with his men and killed 200 of the Philistines. And David brought their foreskins, which were given in full numbers to the king, that would be King Saul, and that he might become the king's son-in-law. And Saul gave him his daughter, Michal, for a wife.
McCall.
See that, dude? That's how you do it, yo. That's how it's done, man.
So, when I read that verse, when I first read that verse, I was thinking kind of like how Native Americans used to scalp people to show their masculinity and their ability to be a warrior or something. That's what kind of reminds me of that.
Yeah, but they wasn't super badass paratroopers because they just took the scalp. This dude said, no, I'm taking your manlyhood. Not only am I taking your manlyhood, but I'm giving it to the king so I can take his woman. See, that's super duper badass paratrooper stuff. Right. Okay. But do we have to sit there and say, well, no one was really there except for David and the 200 men that foreskins, and they're all dead anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Or this is a very disturbing verse. I can just, throw it away because, blah, 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 whatever. No, of course not.
Nobody was there.
Yeah, this is a difficult passage. Now, here's another thing, too, and I'm going to get to this because I'm going to put this in kind of order here. The Bible is descriptive in some places, not prescriptive.
Right.
And this is the thing that the Muslims don't understand when they're talking about their Muhammad as the perfect example to mankind. So when Muhammad did something, including the way he went to the bathroom, you got to emulate that, right? That's a good thing. So when Muhammad actually married Aisha at 9 years of age, that makes it halal from Allah. You're doing a good thing if you emulate that. Now, are we to go out? I mean, Eric, you didn't do this. You didn't go and take 200 foreskins and give it to your wife or her father to marry her.
Not 200. No, not 200.
Not 200. Oh, you can only get one. But anyway.
I'm gonna leave that out.
Issa wants to say something.
I'm not touching that one with a 10-foot pole.
The historical context of where this is taking place. So in the history of the Israelites, you have the Shoftim first. You have the period of there's a certain period of prophets. Then you have the Shoftim, which are the judges. And after the judges, you have the Malachim, you have the kings. So what happens is actually, because Israel is in a really disarray position, if you read the book of Judges, you'll see that it's actually pretty difficult and painful. And that's on purpose because there is disarray within the kingdom of Israel. You have Samson, you have Shamgar. I actually wrote a whole paper on Shamgar. He's a very interesting judge because there's only 2 passages about him in the whole text. You have several other judges. You have 12 judges that are there.
Gideon, Ehud, Barak.
What would say it again?
I said Gideon, Ehud,
Gideon, exactly.
Barak. Yeah, okay.
And what happens is then there are the kings, but the Israelite people were not supposed to have kings. And Shmuel or Samuel says, you don't do this. Don't have the kings. It's not a good thing for your people. It's going to be bad for our people, the Israelite people. But at the time, the Israelite people said, we want a king. And what happens is ultimately, Hashem or God gives them, a king. And it's actually a negative thing. You have Saul, and then you have David. And it's actually something that's not good for the Israelite people. So it actually makes sense that, of course, it's going to be a little bit problematic because this is not what was supposed to happen for the Israelite people. But it's the similar kind of story like when you have the golden calf. The Israelite people were not supposed to do that. And then there's a ramification for that. So we need to look at the context of this as well.
Oh, exactly. I agree with you completely, Issa. And you brought up a very interesting point regarding the king. God actually says to the prophet, he shall lord over you. Fine. I mean, he's angry. Fine. You want a king? I will give you a king, and he shall lord it over you.
Well, up to that point, God was their king. I mean, God himself was their king, and they said, "Well, we don't want you anymore. We want a human king."
Like all the other. Like all the other nations around us, I believe is how the verse goes. But here's something interesting I want to point out to you in my study of Rome. Rome was a republic for 500 years before the Caesars came. Do you know what Rome's first amendment to their limited constitution was? We shall have no king. And anyone who calls or declares himself to be king, anyone can kill him anywhere at any time or any place, and there shall be no retribution. That literally was in their first constitution. So I just think that's an interesting contract. Rome, the pagans, did not want a king, and then they executed you know what I mean? They crucified the king, the true king, and then they took upon themselves a Caesar. I just think that's interesting, but that's a sideline. But yeah, no, these verses are not problematic to me. Okay, they are not, and I'm sure there are Christians who, like, just because they're New Testament Christians, they don't read the Old Testament. These verses are not problematic to me, because I can sit there and say, yeah, like I said, David was a super duper badass paratrooper. Okay, and yes, okay, all this stuff was coming about, okay, because, okay, well, first of all, this was the Bronze Age, basically. Actually, this had already started into the Iron Age with David. But yes, this was brutal times, and it is prescriptive, or it is descriptive, not prescriptive. We are not ordered, or we are not to emulate when we want to go and propose marriage to a woman to give her husband or her father 200 foreskins. Okay? No, that's not the way this works.
Could you imagine if that was a prescriptive? I mean, could you imagine the hurt that would be? Oh my goodness.
Well, I think there's a lot of problems with the
it would be a constant warfare.
David actually gets called out because of his illicit affair with Bathsheba.
I'm getting to that. So,
okay. And I was just going to say, and then Nathan calls him out. So,
I'm getting to that. So, if you can share my screen again, that's the next point. Remember. Okay. Now, here's the thing. Like I said, David was a super duper badass paratrooper. And actually, God says of David, he is a man after my own heart. Does he not? Right?
He does.
Okay.
Exactly.
But here's what this man after David's own heart does. And again, this is descriptive, not prescriptive. In the spring of the year, the time when the king goes out to battle, David sent Joab and his servants with him and all of Israel, and they ravage the Amorites and besiege Rabbah. But David remained at Jerusalem. Okay, maybe he's not so much a badass super paratrooper now, okay? But anyway, he's older. It happened late one afternoon when David rose from his couch and was walking on the roof of the king's house. Well, anyway, so he sees her, he wants her, blah, 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 but she's married, and she's married to a stand-up guy, okay? The wife of Uriah the Hittite, okay? Now, I have heard Christians say that this is acceptable because the dude was a Hittite. I have heard, even Jews say this, okay? So it is perfectly acceptable for him to do this. Okay, no, I don't make any excuses for this, okay? Because this Hittite was a stand-up guy. So David sent a messenger and took her, and she came to them. So David sent word to Joab, send me Uriah the Hittite, because now she's pregnant. So now he's got to cover this crap up, right? So what does he do? He says, okay, come back here, dude, and go sleep with your wife. Have fun, okay? But then he says, no, this dude's a stand-up guy. Uriah comes. Okay, well, he says, go down to the house. When they told David, Uriah did not go to the house, David said, Uriah, have you not come from a journey? Why do you not go to your house? Uriah said to David, the ark and Israel and Judah dwell in booths, and my lord Joab and the servants of my lord are camping in open fields. So then shall I go to my house to eat and drink and lie with my wife? As you live and as your soul lives, I will not do this thing. He's a stand-up guy. He's thinking of his men. He's thinking of his people. Do you see what I'm saying? This is a stand-up guy. And how is David? No, first of all, David sleeps with his wife, gets her pregnant, right? Okay. Anyway, with Solomon, by the way, with Solomon. Okay. Anyway. So then I go to my house to eat and drink, Mom. As you live and as your soul lives, I will not do this thing. Then David said to Uriah, remain here today also and tomorrow. And he kept it up. He kept trying to do this. And Uriah's like, no, I'm not going to do this. So what does David do? Because now he's got to cover up this crap. Okay, not this crap, but he's got to cover up this stuff. In the morning, David wrote a letter to Joab and sent by the hand of Uriah. In the letter he wrote, set Uriah in the forefront of the hardest fighting, and then draw back from him that he may be struck down and die. And as Joab was besieging the city, he assigned Uriah to the place where he knew there were valiant men, and the men of the city came out and fought with Joab and some of the servants of David among the people. Fell. Uriah the Hittite also died. So he's covered up his sin now of a stand-up guy, right? I mean, is there any disagreement? This guy is a righteous man. Okay? And here David, the man who God said is after my own heart, does this terrible thing. Are we to do this terrible thing and emulate David?
Are we supposed to follow the Sunnah of David? No.
Yes. No.
We do not follow David's Sunnah.
Do we agree that this is a horrible thing? He ought not have done this horrible thing?
I think everybody could agree to that.
It's called out. The prophet Nathan or Nathan calls him out.
He said, "Yeah, I'm going to get to that in a second." But I just want to let this. No. I'm not busting you out for jumping ahead. But no, we're on the same page here. Okay. But I just want to let this sit there. This is a horrible, terrible thing. But we don't sit there and say, well, you know, the only two people that were there were David and Bathsheba, so nobody really knows what happened. And the only people there at the battle were Joab and the Hittite. But the Hittite's dead. And can you really trust anything that these Jews and, you know, that were writing in Judea were saying, or no, they would be writing in Israel were saying about, you know, the Jews in Judea? Oh, they were just trying to elevate their man to be king over David. No, we don't do this. We don't throw this out. We don't ignore this, because you know why? Because it goes on. This prescription or this description now comes with the prescription for what does God say.
No, but let me point out one thing. Let me point out one thing. What you're going to be talking about makes perfect sense with what has come before. It comes with the context. For an example, to deny the crucifixion would absolutely throw out all of the previous prophecies Jesus made about him being crucified and the testimony that Jesus had risen from the dead. You can't have one with the other. So when they start making the charges of corruption, which they could on this case, I don't know if they would, but if they could, then what they would be doing is they would be throwing out the context of the things that happened before and the things that are going to happen again. I didn't mean to interrupt, but I wanted to make sure everybody understands the hypocrisy and the duplicity that is applied here when they try to make a comparison of what Aisha did or what Muhammad did to Aisha. Go ahead.
Exactly. Actually, I was mistaken, and I made a terrible mistake.
It wasn't Solomon.
It wasn't. Yes, I mean, well, she does give birth to Solomon later, but I made a horrible mistake. But anyway, so let me share the screen again. I think I'm still sharing it. So
no, I'm being a schlub here. Here we go. There we go.
Okay. Remember, the sin is covered up. David has successfully, basically, I would say, commit, if not murder, then at least willful manslaughter through negligence. No, actually, this would be murder. Actually, Eric, would you not agree that if a general sends a man out or a commander sends a man out deliberately to die and then pulls the troops back so he deliberately gets killed, would that not be considered murder under the Uniform Code of Justice? You know what I mean? Does this deliberately? Where in other words, this guy knows, okay, this guy has evidence against his commander that could put him in prison. Okay, and
at a minimum, it would be at a minimum conspiracy to commit murder is what the minimum charge would be, if not first degree murder. I would say that he would be charged with first degree murder. But I'm not
exactly.
I'm not a lawyer.
Yes, I know, but I'm just saying. You know what I mean? Oh, by the way, that reminds me, I got to share the link to the GoFundMe. It's not GoFundMe, it's Give Send Go, for that Marine who stood up and is now being charged with murder for standing up. Anyway. Okay, so remember, the crime is covered up. David got away with it. Oh no, because you don't get away from anything from God. And the Lord sent Nathan to David. He came to him and said to him, there were two men in a certain city, the one rich and the other poor. The rich man had very many flocks and herds, but the poor man had nothing but one little ewe lamb, which he had bought. And he brought it up, and it grew up with him and his children. He used to eat of his morsels and drink from his cup and lie in his arms, and it was like a daughter to him. Now there came a traveler to the rich man, and he was unwilling to take one of his own flock or herd to prepare for the guest who had come to him. But he took the poor man's lamb and prepared it for the man who had come to him. Then David's own anger was greatly kindled against the man, and he said to Nathan, "As the Lord lives, the man who has done this deserves to die. And he shall restore the lamb fourfold, because he did this thing, because he had no pity." Nathan said to David, "You are that man. Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, I anointed you king over Israel, and I delivered you out of the hand of Saul, and I gave you your master's house and your master's wives into your arms, and I gave you the house of Israel and that of Judah. And if this were too little, I would add to you as much more. Why have you despised the word of the Lord to do what is evil in his sight? You have struck down Uriah the Hittite with the sword, and have taken his wife to be your wife, and have killed him with the sword of the Ammonites. Now therefore the sword shall never depart from your house, because you have despised me, and have taken the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be your wife. Thus says the Lord, behold, I will rise up evil against you out of your own house, which I will get to. And I will take your wives before your eyes and give them to your neighbor, and he shall lie with your wives in the sight of this sun. For you did it secretly, but I will do this thing before all of Israel, before the sun." David said to Nathan, "I have sinned against the Lord." And Nathan said to David, "The Lord has also put away your sin. You shall not die." But that was David's commandment. But the Lord said, "No, you shall not die." Because why? Because now, even though David is confronted now, okay, with his sin, he's still repentant. Okay, he's not a king that says, "Who is this Lord that I am?" You know what I mean? Because there are cases in the Bible and even in history where, like Pharaoh, where they would say, "I am." You know what I mean? Okay. Anyway. Okay, and they said, okay, put it. Nevertheless, because by this deed you have utterly scorned the Lord, the child who was born to you shall die. Then Nathan went to his house, and we read on here that David's child with her does die. Okay, but then later we get Solomon's birth, which I want to get to. But anyway, thoughts and opinions on that, and I gotta go check on something for the food. So talks amongst yourselves. You're muted, Eric. Anybody want to comment on this?
No, yeah, okay. Number one, let's look at David's reaction to this. When David is accused and his sin is found out by a prophet of God, a true prophet of God, oh, by the way, what does David do? David goes to his counselor. Watch what he does. He goes to his counselors and he gets them to develop a new law which enables him, because he is the king, to where he can go ahead and have anybody's wife and he can rape them, have sex with them, impregnate them. And then if you would dare object, then he can kill you. Did you see that? Do you see that in the Bible? Did you see it? No, that's not what David did. What David did is he acknowledged his sin before God and he repented in ashes and sackcloth. That's what David did. Now, if you compare that to the things that, for an example, when Muhammad is caught having an affair with Mary the Copt in Hafsa's bed, what does he do? He immediately says, "Oh, please don't tell Aisha that I was doing this." He says he doesn't care about Hafsa. He said, "I promise, I swear I will not do this again." He does initially, he does the right thing. He says, "Oh, yeah, that's the wrong thing to do. I should not be committing adultery against you in the bed, in your very bed, with this slave girl." But then notice what happens with Muhammad as compared to David. David doesn't get some type of revelation saying that it's perfectly permissible for him to do this. Muhammad does get a revelation saying that, what are you doing, Muhammad? I have given you these slave girls. This is part of the gifts that that Allah has bestowed upon you. What are you doing, making promises to your wives about things that I have freely given you, Muhammad? So Muhammad receives a revelation. David repents in sackcloth and ashes. There's a huge difference between the prophets of the Old Testament and this character and caricature, I should say, called Muhammad. Completely different. When men sinned against God, godly men in the Old Testament sinned against God, they repented. They did not make excuses for it. They repented to God. And when we look in the Quran and we look in the Hadith literature, we find the exact opposite. We find Muhammad making excuses, getting these convenient revelations, and completely different. And to say that the God of the Bible and the God of the Quran are the same gods is absolutely ridiculous, and at its best. Anyway, who was this that posted? Andrew Martin posted in the chat here. Let me see if I can share my screen. Present, share screen. And okay, so he said that there's a version of this story in the Quran. Am I correct on that, Andrew? That I haven't been able to read through it. I'm going to go ahead and he says it's in the Quran chapter. What chapter is this? Chapter 38, verses 17 through 26. So let's go ahead and have a read of this. 17. This is verse 17, and we'll just use Sahih International. Okay. Be patient of what they say, and remember, O servant David, the possessor of strength indeed. He was one who repeatedly turned back to Allah. And indeed, we subjected the mountains to praise with him, exalting Allah in the late afternoon and the sunrise, or after the sunrise, and the birds were assembled with all him repeating praises. We strengthened his kingdom and gave him wisdom and discernment in speech. Speaking of David, has there come to you the news of the adversaries when they climbed over the wall of his prayer chamber? What the heck is this? When they entered upon David and he was alarmed by them, they say, fear not. Two adversaries, one of whom was wrong the other. So judge between us with truth and do not exceed, and guide us to the sound path. Indeed, this, my brother, has 99 ewes, and I have 1 ewe. So he said, entrust her to me, and he overpowered me in speech. What kind of convoluted crap is this?
Right.
David said, he has certainly wronged you in demanding your ewe. To his ewes, indeed, many associates oppress one another, except for those who believe and do righteous deeds, and few are they. And David became certain that we had tried him, and he asked forgiveness of his Lord and fell down, bowing in prostration. Notice it says in prostration, and turned in repentance. And let's see. So we forgave him, and indeed for him is nearness to us and a good place of return. How far do I got to read this thing? Holy crap.
That's good enough.
Is there one more verse? One more verse. Oh, David, indeed we have made you a successor upon the earth. So judge between the people in truth, and do not follow your own desire, as it will lead you astray from the way of Allah. Indeed, those who go astray from the way of Allah will have a severe punishment, having forgotten the day of account.
I think that last part, do not follow your own desire, is an example of what Mo continually does. I mean, he goes back and he gives himself permission to have sex with Mary, the cop. Yeah.
Yeah.
He gives himself permission, not by all of a sudden having a divine revelation.
Well, yeah. So that's the point. If this was the verse written in the Quran, the actual accounting, God would not have responded through Nathan in this way, condemning David, which I'm going to get to in a second. But instead it said, "Hey, there's nothing about that."
Okay, now well, notice the difference in this story, though. Okay, if this story is supposed to be, the Quran is supposed to be the exact speech of the God of the universe, how does the God of the universe get the story so wrong from what we find in the Bible? I mean, can the Bible be that corrupted?
And does the God of the universe? And does the God of the universe have a mouse in his pocket?
Evidently, his prophet has a sock on his hand. That's for sure.
Because there's a lot of we going on over there.
Oh, it just shows Allah has partners and they don't want anybody talking about it. That's why I keep saying we. He doesn't want you to know who the partners are.
Or is Allah French and he's just saying yes, yes, yes?
Isa, did you want to comment some more on this?
Because he can't exist without them.
Isa, do you have any input on this? Because you brought it up, which I was going to, and I'm sorry I felt bad for cutting you off. You there, Isa?
Yes, I am. Yeah. Sorry. Just had to unmute. Yeah, I think it's exactly like what was being discussed, that when we look at this story, this narrative is not a narrative of just joy and love and happiness. It's a joy of pain and difficulty. It's not basically a permission to do this type of situation, this type of activity. And also, if you didn't really talk about the story of what happens with, David and Michal. They don't actually have a happy relationship. It's actually pretty terrible. There's like a pretty terrible breakup between the two. So all that stuff that he didn't really pay off. So I think that's something to think about as well.
So the cutting off of the foreskins was not enough for this Michal lady.
There was other
somebody he couldn't trust.
Cutting off
exactly. When you break that trust, that bond, it's it's almost impossible to repair. That's
a great point. I should have put that in there, but I kind of skipped over that. Because actually, there's David's. Dude, this is a dysfunctional family. This is a seriously dysfunctional family, which I'll get to in a second. But let's go ahead and share my screen again. Which one do I want to go to?
I don't know.
Yeah, let's go with this one because I find this one very good. Remember, David's a super duper badass paratrooper, right? He slew and killed everyone in the name of the Lord for the house of Israel, and he was supposed to build the temple, right? He was promised to build the temple. Okay. And actually, David does go out and prepare it. He buys. Oh, let's just read this. David commanded to gather together. This is in 1 Chronicles 22. David commanded to gather together the residents and aliens who were in the land of Israel, and he set out the stone cutters to prepare dressed stones for the building of the house of God. David also provided great quantities of iron for nails and for doors and gates, the clamps, as well as bronze quantities beyond weighing, and cedar timbers without number. For the Sidonians and Tyrenians brought great quantities of cedar to David. For David said, Solomon, my son, is young and inexperienced, and the house that is to be built for the Lord must be exceedingly magnificent, not a Kaaba, of fame and glory throughout all the lands, not a Kaaba. I will therefore make preparations for it. So David provided the materials in great quantity before his death. But this is the part that I actually wanted to focus on. Then David, he called for Solomon his son and charged him to build the house of the Lord, the God of Israel. David said to Solomon, my son, I had it in my heart to build a house to the name of the Lord my God. But the word of the Lord came to me, saying, you have shed much blood and have waged great wars. You shall not build a house to my name, because you have shed so much blood to the house to my name, because you have shed so much blood before me on the earth. Behold, a son shall be born to you, who shall be a man of rest. I will give him rest from all his surrounding enemies, for his name shall be Solomon, and I will give him peace and quiet to Israel in his days. He shall build a house for my name. He shall be my son, and I will be his father, and I will establish his royal throne in Israel forever. Okay, so notice David is not only being punished, okay, for his sin, okay, against the Hittite man with Bathsheba, but through Bathsheba, Solomon is to be born, and he is to build the house, right? He's to build the house of the Lord. David is taken from him because why? Because he has shed so much blood, like giving 200 foreskins, as a price. It's a little excessive. Just a little excessive. I'm just saying. Okay. But there's another verse I want to get to, but I just want to show you how things are taken away from him. Remember, this is a dysfunctional family. Think about it, because what does God say? God says, your whole house, it's done, right? You know what I mean? I am going to, and this is pretty much what happened. Okay. But let's take a look at this. This is actually honestly a very disturbing passage. Okay. And this is something actually, I mean, no, the Muslims don't know about this. They would bring this up. I've never heard a Muslim bring this up because they only go by lists. You know what I mean? Well, let's read this. This is Ammon and Tamar, and this actually. Well, let's read this. Now, Absalom, David's son. You got it.
Well,
now,
where are we
Absalom,
at?
David's son, had a beautiful.
This is Samuel, 2 Samuel.
This is 2 Samuel 13.
Okay. Right. Okay.
Now, Absalom, David's son, had a beautiful sister whose name was Tamar. And after a time, Ammon, David's son, loved her. And Ammon was so tormented that he made himself ill because of his sister Tamar. Again, this is I'm not making excuses. This is half sister.
They're half siblings.
Right, but still, it's pretty disturbing.
Still incest.
Yeah, for she was a virgin, and it seemed impossible to Ammon to do anything to her. But Ammon had a friend whose name was Jenadab, the son of Shema, David's brother. And Jenadab was a very crafty man. And he said to him, "O son of the king, why are you so haggard morning after morning? Will you not tell me?" Ammon said to him, "I love Tamar, my brother Absalom's sister." Jonadab said to him, "Lie down on your bed and pretend to be ill. And when your father comes to see you, say to him, 'Let my sister Tamar come and give me bread to eat and prepare the food in my sight.'" This is like the devil. Jonadab is the devil. It says a crafty man. You know what I mean? Okay? And pretend to be ill and come to your father. Okay, say to him, "Let my sister Tamar give me bread and prepare the food in my sight, that I may see it and eat from her hand." So Ammon lay down, pretending to be ill, well, etc., etc., etc. Then David sent her to Tamar, saying, "Go to your brother Ammon's house and prepare food for him," yada, yada, yada. And she took the pan and emptied it. I'm skipping over some stuff. Then Ammon said to Tamar, "Bring the food into the chamber, that I may eat it from your hand." Okay, but when she brought them near to eat, he took hold of her and said to her, "Come, lie with me, my sister." She answered him, "No, my brother. Do not violate me, for such a thing is not to be done in Israel. Do not do this outrageous thing. As for me, where could I carry my shame? And as for you, you would be as one of the outrageous fools in Israel. Now therefore, please speak to the king, for he will not withhold me from you." But he would not listen to her, and being stronger than she, he violated her and lay with her. Then afterwards, Ammon rightfully so, well, no, not rightfully so. Then Ammon hated her. He hated his victim with a very great hatred, so that the hatred with which he hated her was greater than the love with which he loved her. And Ammon said to her, "Get up and go." But she said to him, "No, my brother, for this wrong in sending me away is greater than the other that you did to me." But he would not listen to her. He called the young man who served him and said, "Put this woman out of my presence and bolt the door after her." Now she was wearing a long robe with sleeves, and thus were the virgin daughters of the king dressed. So his servant put her out and bolted the door after her. And Tamar put ashes on her head and tore her long robe that she wore, and she laid her hand on her head and went away crying aloud as she went. And her brother Absalom said to her, "Has Ammon your brother been with you? Now hold your peace, my sister. He is your brother. Do not take this to heart." So Tamar lived a desolate woman in her brother Absalom's house. When the king of David heard of this thing, he was very angry. But Absalom spoke to Ammon neither good nor bad, for Absalom hated Ammon, because he had violated his sister Tamar. Absalom murders Ammon. I wouldn't say it's murder at this point, but hey, after 2 full years, Absalom had sheep shearers at Balsal Hazor, which is near Ephraim. Behold, your servant has sheep shearers. Please let the king and his servants go with your servant. He pressed him and he would not. Well, anyway, I could read on, but he kills him. So the dude rapes his half sister, then is mad at her, throws her out. Okay, all right. then his half-brother then murders him because of what he had done to his sister. Honestly, this is a dysfunctional family. This is not something that you emulate. This is not something that you say, this is a good thing. Do you see what I'm saying? And all this, and we can read more and more about David's dysfunctional family, okay? The one that the Christ had come through to restore us to him, okay? To cure our dysfunctional families, to cure us of this wicked and evil sin, okay? Through the house of David. Do you see the contrast here, okay? But again, this is not something that is prescriptive. This is descriptive. This is not something we are to emulate. And as a matter of fact, the story is, if we emulate this stuff, this is what happens to us. Do you see what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
This is what sin does. It destroys. It destroys. It destroys the individual. It destroys family, and and has the potential, as in this case, to destroy everybody around them. And again, like you said, descriptive, not prescriptive. And I've actually been in conversations with Muslims that have said that here are great examples where we find incest in the Bible. And since we find incest in the Bible, it is therefore the sunnah for Christians and Jews to follow. You go clear back to Lot lying with his daughters. You have this example here. You also have examples of Absalom. Didn't Absalom engage in sex with one of David's wives or concubines or something of that nature? So you have
all of them.
Okay. So you have all of these examples of incest being committed in the Bible. So therefore, the Bible teaches it's okay to commit incest. It's absolutely ridiculous to make that type of assumption. But based on their thinking, the way that they read the prophets, that you're supposed to try to emulate the actions of the prophets. And since Lot was a prophet, well, then it's okay that the Christians and Jews actually think that it's okay to go ahead and
they do that without. They do that without reading the scriptures to find out how that happened. I mean,
they don't even read their own scriptures, let alone ours. They just hear these things from their imams, and the Dawagandas that they hang around with, and never think to try to question it. When we read something like this and we see the entire context of the story, we quickly realize that David's family was destroyed because of this sin.
It destroyed Israel. Remember, it destroyed Israel. It broke up Israel. After Solomon, it broke up. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Lisa.
No problem. I was just going to add, actually, these points for most Muslims, the Muslim argument would be, this is why you can't trust the Torah or the Tanakh, because it has bad things about the prophets. In Arabic, there's this concept called, there's a concept called ma'soom. Ma'soom means blameless. So it basically means that for Muslims, all prophets have to be blameless. So they would actually take umbrage to this. They actually would say, well, the Torah is corrupted. This is where Muslims have a critique theologically with Jews. We know the critique against Christians. The critique is that, the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit is a blasphemy. That's what a Muslim would say about that. To the Jew, they would say, wow, look at this horrendous thing. You're saying that these prophets are doing horrible things. This is why the Torah is corrupt and we cannot accept the Torah. This is what the Muslim would argue theologically.
I'm thinking that what was that word that you used to describe that the prophets were not
Ma'soom.
Okay, so I think, doesn't that apply to after they received their prophethood? Because if you look at Moses, murdered an Egyptian. So therefore, we all can admit that was a sinful act. And so
I think it would be a complex thing. A Muslim might argue that, hey, this is what they're doing, working alongside what God wants them to do. And there could be that argument. It really depends on the Muslim. Sure. But some Muslims will say, well, they're all ma'soom. And then if you're a Sunni Muslim, you'll say that all the Sahaba or the companions are ma'soom. They're blameless too. This is where Shias will combat the Sunnis. They'll say, no, these people do have blame and they are problematic. But this is the thing they would say. So it's interesting that this Muslim is arguing this case, because the argument is that they're actually accepting the Torah as being legitimate, which is interesting. That's usually why Muslims attack the Torah. They're attacking the Torah and saying it's corrupted because these people have done things that are bad. Like with Noah, I've heard this before, that Noah drank alcohol. Well, you can't drink alcohol. Even though it's very strange, because I don't know if Muslims really thought this through, but the injunction of
they haven't thought it through.
Alcohol,
so believe me, they don't think a lot when it comes to
the injunction about not drinking alcohol actually comes later in Islam. Muslims could drink alcohol initially speaking, but then that's one of the verses that was abrogated. So then Muslims could drink alcohol later. So it's really weird when they're like, oh, prophets can't drink. And I'm like, yeah, but that injunction wasn't for prophets. And actually, the only thing that it is for Israelite people or Jewish people is that they can drink alcohol, but they can't get drunk, except on Purim, which is the holiday about Esther and Mordecai and Haman. But like the idea is it's an interesting space, because they're like, well, they drink alcohol, so they're bad. And so that they can't be that way, so they have to be pure and true. But then the difficulty is, if we read the Quran, it's sort of like a Spark Notes version. It doesn't really tell us who these people are. You have to read the Torah, and you would have to read the New Testament if you want to know about these protagonists that exist within the Quran. The Quran doesn't really tell us much about these people. We only really see a Spark Notes version. Like, I did a comparison between the narrative of Joseph in the Quran versus the Torah, and it's pretty close. It's the closest narrative that you can see, but a lot of it is very theological, pieces within it. It doesn't really give us any details of the people, and there are slight deviations, but it's an interesting thing because that's the only passage that's even close, and that part about Joseph is very short. It's not very long in the space of the text. So it's very strange that folks are like, well, I'm just going to read the Quran and that's going to be good enough. You're really just not going to know any. You're not going to, like, if you read about Jesus in the Quran, it's barely anything. It says that he's from a virgin birth. He made clay pigeons come alive. He's the cousin of John the Baptist, and they said he was not crucified. He's raised. There's very little. There's not a full character that we see in the Quran. So you actually need to look at these texts if you want a full picture.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. We had a question in chat here. What about polygamy? And I'm embarrassed I wasn't well versed in polygamy. If you follow what is taught in Genesis, a man shall leave his mother and father and cleave to his wife, and the two shall become as one flesh.
And it's not wives; it's singular.
Right? Yeah, and Jesus also makes that admonition, and I get it. You can go through all the examples in the Bible where David had multiple wives, Solomon had 900 or so. But God never sanctioned all of those marriages, though.
He never commanded that to happen.
Right. God's plan for marriage has always been between one man and one woman.
Israel, right? I mean, you look at Jacob, and he worked 7 years. He was given a wife. Might not be the one he wanted. He could have returned at that point. I mean, that was his choice, and he made a stupid mistake, and then pretty much ended up with 4 wives because he got the servants of the women he was with. And if you actually read that entire story about Jacob, it's not pretty. I mean, boys don't get along because part of it's because they have different mommies.
Right. And again, descriptive, not prescriptive. We need to make sure that we understand that.
There's only one person we're supposed to follow, and that is Jesus.
Amen.
Right, exactly. Mm-hmm. And if you notice, the whole thing, it shows the definite consequences. Now, that's pretty much all I got. I do have others, but like I said, it's getting time where I got to start cooking these steaks pretty soon in the grill. But like I said, listen. Could I have sat there and said that all these verses clearly only certain people were there? Nobody knows what really happened. So, and the writers of First Chronicles were written against the writers of First Kings. Because they were written, and one is, supposedly according to the scholars, one was written in Israel and the other was written in Judea, and there was a civil war going on, blah blah blah. So they're writing against each other. So we can't trust none of this. Because it was written in Iraq. No. But you know what I mean? Absolutely not. See, we do not do that. Okay, it's not what we do. Okay, we take a look at these difficult passages, and there are more. Okay, Muslims, there are some serious difficult passages out there. Don't get me wrong. Okay, but we don't sit there and reject them. We don't sit there and say, no, this is, clearly, even though it's Sahih Bible, it's not Sahih anymore. Or we don't sit there and say, well, we only accept the parts that are good that we like. Or anything that's bad about the character of whatever any of these biblical heroes, because we know what their character should be, because we believe they're one-dimensional superbook comic heroes. You know what I mean? So therefore, anything bad that shows that they're not one-dimensional, we have to reject. No, absolutely not. We can put things in context. We can put things in a realistic world. And more importantly, the Bible shows you the disasters that happens to these people when they do not follow the Lord. And it also demonstrates the repentant heart, that even though you are this wicked, vile thing, what is important is that you turn back to God. You do not continue to sin and promote this sin, but you are still going to have to face the repercussions of your sin, except not going to hell part. But anyway, but no, there are definite things, okay, that this has a deeper meaning, okay, than your one-dimensional character Muhammad that you think is the greatest thing since sliced bread and should be emulated to the point of how you go to the bathroom. And if you don't like the fact that he had sex with the prepubescent girl, you can just throw that crap out. No, it doesn't work that way. People who are truly not ashamed of their religion do not do such a thing. People who are truly ashamed, who are truly not ashamed of their prophet, do not dismiss these things. You see what I'm saying? Okay. And that's all pretty much what I wanted to say on that. I think, Eric, you were going to talk about Lot, because I do have some comments on that if I have time. I'd like to comment on some of that, but you were going to bring up Lot. Is that not true, or no? Or did I misunderstand?
Well, I can. I mean, it's one of the examples that I use when you look at some of the objections that are pointed at Christianity by the Dawagandists. They'll say, Christianity or the Jews, they teach incest, and they'll use those examples of Lot getting fooled into getting drunk and then sleeping with his daughters. There you have the example of a prophet, don't you see? And nobody in the Jewish circles or Christian circles, and I might be wrong on this, but is there any sect out there, Jewish sect or Christian sect, that considers Lot to be a prophet of any shape
no,
or kind?
you don't consider a guy who makes bad choices
the
prophet.
Quran says he's a prophet.
That's what I'm saying. The Quran says he's a prophet, but nobody else says he's a prophet. This is one of these things that Muhammad was, the guy had no idea what he was talking about. He hears these names, so since he hears these names are in the Bible, so therefore they must be prophets. Why doesn't he think that Amalek, Amalek, whatever the heck his name was, the Amorites that the Jews were forced to fight going into the Holy Land? Are the Amalekites? There we go. I'm trying to get this right. Was he a prophet because his name's in the Bible too? No. Lot made all kinds of bad choices. He was offered, do I choose the really nice grassy land, or do I choose what Abraham had to choose? Do I stay in Sodom because it's nothing but a horde of sodomites, and take my family out of this, or do I and enjoy a good soft life that he had there, or do I remove my family from these subjective evil forces that are around? And it ends up destroying him. So no, Lot was nothing of a prophet of any sort, and to try to claim that he was a prophet and to follow his sunnah is absolutely ridiculous. It's absurd.
Well, I just want to point out. Well, no, I have heard Jews and Christians make horrible excuses for this. Say no. Well, they were, you have to understand, they just saw the whole world end, so they thought they had to repopulate the entire earth. Actually, that's what the Bible.
And that's some of the that's an exegesis of the passage. Yeah.
Right. Well. So, but here's the thing: if you notice, and this is what I would bring up, and this is what I do bring up. is that when Abraham is arguing, okay, with God, because that who is he talking to? The one of the strange men, after the two angels have left, he's talking to a pre-incarnate Jesus there, the Word of the Lord, the angel of the Lord, and he's talking to him, and he's going to argument. What about 100 men? What about 50 men? What about 20? And he gets to 5. Why does he stop at 5? Okay, because as what has happened,
I think he stopped at 10. Didn't he stop at 10?
I thought it was 5.
No,
It's
he
5
stopped at
prayers.
5.
It's 5. Okay,
stopped
this
at
is where
5.
Muhammad rips the story off and tries to say
Exactly. The 5 prayers. Yeah. But
Right.
yeah, it's 5. But why does he stop at 5 now? Why is it? Because he knows his brother Lot is there, right? Doesn't he think Lot would be a righteous man?
What's his nephew? It's his nephew. Yeah.
Well, his nephew.
Yeah.
What does he think that his nephew would be a righteous man? Doesn't he think that his wife would be a righteous woman? That his righteous nephew married? Doesn't he think that his 2 daughters would be righteous? Daughters. You know what I mean? So again, no. The point is not even Lot was righteous, but God spared or tried to spare, spared Lot, and his daughters, and and the wife as well. She could have come on, but she screwed up. Okay, do you know what I mean? Because of Abraham. Do you see what I'm saying? It was God's choice. He said, "No, I'm going to only choose you, even though you people are wicked sinners, just as bad as the rest of them. But I'm still going to call you out of this. My choice to do this for my name, so that everyone will know." And after he saves them, what does he do? He gets drunk and has sex with his daughters. And I've heard
it was worse in the long run. They didn't. I mean, if you read that story, Lot is such a jerk, and his family are such jerks that the angels have to physically drag them out.
Yes, exactly. Yes. And then he's trying to give his daughters to. Yes.
I mean, he has to force them to leave. If this guy's a prophet and he's fighting against those who are trying to save them, is that really? The kind of thing a prophet? If that's Sunnah fighting with the people who are trying to save you, I guess that's an example we can see in Islam all over the world. Let's see. We're trying to give you food. Oh, steal the food. Oh, no, we're trying to give you food to distribute. That doesn't mean steal and sell. It means distribute to the people in need. We see this all over the world when they're in need. It sounds maybe they think it's Sunnah.
There's something interesting to think about. I'm sorry, I don't mean to interject, but there's one thing I want to consider as well. It's interesting to look at the Quran versus, the Hebrew scriptures, the Tanakh, and the New Testament. Because when we look at these texts, the Quran it's an interesting text in the sense that it only mentions certain people. I think there's like 30 names that are mentioned. But if we look at the Tanakh, it's like 40 books, if we're not, we're on Nevi'im and Ketuvim, like the words and the prophets, all of this. When we look at the text, it's really interesting because it's very limited. It's in comparison. So you don't have Samuel, you don't have Joshua. You would think Joshua would be a major important person to be mentioned because he's the one who basically takes Jerusalem, right? And he's not mentioned in the Quran. I think, which I think is
he's not mentioned because if he was mentioned, that's a very important point, Isa. He's not mentioned because if he was mentioned, that would provide no right for Muslims to come in to Israel. That's why he's not mentioned. They can talk about. They've already stated at this point that the Jews are Egyptians. But if they mention Joshua and Joshua taking the promised land, now they have to admit that this is all Jewish land, that Muslims have no right to it, and they should never have dared to touch it. So that's the reason why you don't see that.
Well, the Quran does mention Joshua.
Where?
Okay, here it is. It is Surah 5:23. And it spells it in Mosin Khan, Yushua. S-H-A. They put in parentheses Joshua. And then it says, and Caleb.
Joshua and Caleb, but they don't mention them anything.
It's not
but
by name. That might be the translator who's putting that there. I'm looking at it right now. I don't. This is my.
No, it's not the translator. No, it's not the translator. This is Mohsen Khan. He literally spells Joshua in Y-U-S-H-A. Then he puts in parentheses Joshua, but he spells it Yeshua.
Yusha. Because it's the same name. Joshua and Jesus are the same. It's God's Savior or God's salvation.
What chapter and verse again?
It's 5, Ayah 23. Al-Ma'idah.
I'm just looking at what Usama put it in. So now I'm just going to read that. Okay, 5:23. 2 men among the fearers, Allah graced on them, said, enter on them the door. So when you enter it, so surely you will be victorious, and on Allah, so depend on it, you are believers.
Musa Khan, what's his name? You said Khan?
He's not literal at all. Yeah, because this is very literal.
He's inserting that. He's inserted that in. I'm like, I've read this text. I've read the whole Quran, so I'm like, I've never seen it. So I'm like, it's mentioning, it's a pronoun. It's saying, oh, there's like these 2 people. And then he's saying, oh, it's Caleb. There's no Caleb mentioned in the Quran. There's no Joshua that's mentioned there. There could be a Joshua in the Hadith, but I haven't read the 30,000 Hadith, but I
agree. Yeah, I looked in the international, in the Arabic, and it does not mention those 2 names, even Yeshua or Caleb. So,
they don't
in the Arabic, it's not in there. So, I do stand corrected on that.
They would have to talk about the promised land at some point, and it's too fearful a topic. In fact, we look at the first full Quran. It's already way after they have killed and slaughtered hundreds of thousands of people. So yes, it's a problem, and that would be the end. It would be the end of Islam if somebody actually found a discussion on that within the Quran. They would get rid of it. They would toss it out. They would toss the Quran out today.
So it's interesting too. The Quran has other people's names that you don't really see in other texts. You have like Luqman, you have Saleh, you have these types of folks who are here, and Shuaib, and they're not. Shuaib might be someone else, but Saleh and Luqman for sure are
49 names. The Quran has mentioned 49 separate names.
And I mean that's very little.
Look at it.
The Quran is very short compared to the Tanakh. So it's a
very, very short.
Okay, the Quran mentions 49 separate names, and this is what you would expect from something that is plagiarized and fake. It mentions people groups, the people of Ad, which is way up in northern Arabia. Kind of odd that they would be talking about a known people group up in northern Arabia. Mentions them 23 times. Talmud, same thing, 24 times. Midian, 7 times. Medina is only mentioned twice. Valley of Mecca is mentioned once. Valley of Becca mentions once. Tuba is mentioned twice. Al-Ras is mentioned twice. Hij is mentioned once. And let's see, there was something else in here. When you look at the words per geographical location, in the Gospel of Matthew lists 31 different locations. Mark, 26 locations. Luke, 31 locations. John, 14 locations. The Quran, 9. And these are just the Gospels, the separate Gospels, not combined. So when we look at the brevity or the lack of succinctness or description, this is exactly what you would get from somebody that's making up as they go. But that's not what the show's about.
Oh,
the show's
what's worse is that those descriptions are they actually portray, if you put them all together, a guy who lies and has to keep telling lies because he can't remember what he said before.
Right. And they don't correspond to the locations of Mecca today. And this is one of the arguments against Mecca being existing in the 7th century. None of the descriptions of Mecca that we find in the Quran even come close. I mean, they just describe it as having olive trees. It's as tillable soil. It has a parallel. It has none of these things. It has 2 mountains.
Even to this day.
Right. These things are not there. And so when you go into Quranic geography, if you don't have the book, I think it's even online. Quranic Geography by Dan Gibson. Go get it. And it is a treasure trove of information. And he's gone in there and he's done the work, and he's identified how the Quran does not line up with Quranic geography. There's all kinds of different problems there. Okay, what I wanted is Rad. Are you done? Rad's probably out cooking.
He's cooking.
He's cooking. All right. Let me go ahead and bring up what I had prepared. I told you at the beginning of the show that I had gone in one direction and Rad had gone in another. So what I wanted to do is I just wanted to handle some of the most common objections and what the answers are to them. This is nothing. The majority of you here, I would probably venture to say, almost all of you here have seen these before, and this is not this is not nothing new. This is not new information at all. Let's go ahead and get started here. Okay, so the number one objection that we always hear, I mean, who has not heard this one? Where does Jesus say, "I am God, worship me"? And the quick answer is, and this is the one that when I see this on Facebook, this is the way I answer it. Number one, he doesn't in those exact words, but number two, more importantly, it is in the Injil, right next to where he says that I'm the virgin-born son of Mary and I lived a sinless life.
And before you go any further, you use the exact same question against them. Where does Jesus say, "I am not God, don't worship me"? In those exact words.
Right, and we find descriptions of his disciples doing this.
Yes, and other people.
In the Quran, where does Muhammad say, "I am a prophet"?
He doesn't. He says, "I'm a messenger." Is it a messenger? He says, "I'm a messenger, only a messenger."
Yes. And a warner. And a
warner.
And a fake prophet, and somebody who can't do miracles to demonstrate the veracity of his.
I think what's strange too is if the New Testament or Evangelion is corrupted, why did they even care? Like, it doesn't matter. It's a horrible, evil, corrupted text. So why are you even entertaining? Like, it's a weird thing that I've seen with certain
because they say that the Quran came to confirm it. That's
but this weird apologetics where I see that people do this kind of like cafeteria Bible picking.
Oh, you think so?
You go to there and they're like, "Well, I'm going to take this verse because it
it's a buffet, right? Yeah.
And then I'm not going to validate this other verse because it doesn't fit." Because you could take John 3:16. I mean, whether Jesus says it or not, if you're going to affirm the Christian faith, you could just go and look at John 3:16. It's pretty clear that is the narrative of what the New Testament is saying. So if you're going to say, well, it's not in the Gospels, okay, fine, but it's in the text, holistically speaking. That is a theological
over and
argument
over again.
text.
Yes.
Okay, so where does Jesus say, "I am God, worship me"? Well, if you go to John 8:58, where Jesus is being confronted by the Pharisees, he says, "Before Abraham was, I am." He gives the ego eime. This is the name of God, the Greek in Greek anyway. That's where
I am.
I am, right. And then here in Mark 14:62, here's where he's standing trial before Caiaphas. And if you remember when we stand in trial before Caiaphas, he tells Caiaphas, "And you will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds." So this is a direct description of who he is. So this idea that Jesus never claimed deity is absolutely
the title Son of Man is actually a title of deity.
Why did they crucify him? Hello.
Well, that's the thing, and this is the thing. You don't want to, ask. Okay, if for the context, why are they doing all these things to him? Why did they want to crucify him? Well, Caiaphas tears his robe and says, "Blasphemy! What more do we have to have?" He's claiming to be the Son of God. He's claiming to be God. It does not follow when you try to take away all these other texts that you come. Could you please donate? Yeah. Okay. This is Rad is posting this as far as it's like a GoFundMe for this Daniel Penny guy that Alvin Bragg DA in New York City is hemming up for what was it, first-degree murder charges or manslaughter or something like that. Anyway, let's see. I'm trying to keep up here. What else do we have? We have other passages. Here we are. Okay. When you use this book right here, folks, if you do not have this book, right here. Hold on, let me hold it up here so everybody can see it. Where am I at? Right here. Here we are. Okay, this book right here, Putting Jesus in His Place. I would highly recommend that you get this book. And what these two authors do here is they use an anachronism, and what's the word I'm looking for? An
acronym.
Golly, why couldn't an acronym? Why they use it? It's called HANDS. The honors that Jesus shares. Hold on, let me get it back up here. Sorry. The honors that Jesus shares that are only that honors given to God. The authority that Jesus has are only given to God. The names that Jesus uses for Himself are only given to God. The deeds that He does are only done by God. And the seat, the right hand of God the Father. All of these things demonstrate His deity in the Bible. So where does Jesus say, I'm God, worship me? It's all over the Bible. And then He receives worship in Matthew, 3 different spots, and then in John, where you have the disciples worshiping Him, you have Mary worshiping Him, and then you have Thomas calling Him my God, my King. He's called Emmanuel, which means God.
My Lord and my God.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you.
That's exactly what He says. Emmanuel, which means God with us. And this is prophesied in the book of Isaiah. And then you have in Luke, where He's called Christ, what? The Lord God. 1 Corinthians, it says one Lord, Jesus Christ. This word Lord is referring to Him as God. That's how it's translated, Einstein. And here you have in Colossians, He's being described as what? Deity, God in bodily form. And then you have in 2 Peter. Peter knew Jesus very well, he's probably the head, the most important disciple, says our God, what? Our God and our Savior, Jesus Christ. And then Jesus claims, I and the Father are one. And then John 17:5, glorify me now, Father, with the glory that I had you before the world was. So all over the New Testament and all over in the Old Testament, we have prophecies of Jesus, God coming in the form of a man and existing among His people in these messianic verses all over the Old Testament. And in the New Testament, we see the fulfillment and Jesus acknowledging that He was God. To say that Jesus did not claim to be God is just, all it is just a Dower-Gandis talking point, and it's easily refuted.
And that's just too deep for our Muslim friends. This just goes way too deep. They can't grasp it.
Well, it's the theology,
go,
Islamic
guys.
theology, and you're absolutely right. It's Islamic theology. It's about as deep.
They're not allowed to. They're not allowed to think. See, they're zombies, right?
And that's what actually Sharia says. You're not allowed to question. So, yes,
exactly.
Okay, next objection. Can we go to the next objection? Here we go.
Let's go.
Let's go. We're out of. Oh my gosh, we're an hour and a half into the show. You guys got to quit talking so much. All right. The Bible has been corrupted. Has anybody heard this one?
It always makes me laugh.
From liars, yes. From liars. If you want to lie, then we've heard it from liars, yes.
Okay. If you have not heard this ever, come up on mic or in chat. Go ahead. You've never heard this argument. If you've never heard this. And we'll wait to see if anybody admits this. Ed, have you never heard this argument?
Then why read it at all? Then that would be my question. If you're going to make that argument, you're trying to have your cake and eat it too. If this text if these texts are corrupted, then why even read them? Why even talk about them?
Here's the problem with that whole statement is they don't have the text that proves that it's corrupted. Whereas we have over 25,000 manuscripts that prove that what we have is the real deal, and it goes way before Muhammad's time.
Yeah, it's
way before.
Right. If you believe the Bible is corrupted, show me where, when, and by whom. That's all you have to do.
Eric, while we're talking about corruption, when is the first? What is the date for the first complete Quran that they actually have?
Oh, it's like 740 something, isn't it? It's like no. It's later than that.
It's the Kufi manuscript that's dated to 1,000 years AD.
Okay, so this is our newest guest here, Hunter Bailey. By the way,
hey, how you doing,
Hunter's guys? In Clubhouse, right, Hunter?
Guys,
yes, sir.
Guys, it's worse than that. the only complete Quran manuscript they have is dated to 1924.
That's what I
Okay.
thought it
All
was.
right. So maybe I'm misunderstanding this. So there is not a Quran. You're saying that there is not a Quran with all 100 and was it 14?
No, not 100%.
No,
Before
not yeah. That's
1924.
exactly.
No.
Really? See,
Yes.
I've always never. And here's the gullibility. I just kind of accepted that, just like we accept that Mecca existed in the 7th century. We just kind of accepted the standard Islamic narrative saying, well, we have a complete Quran from such and such a date. And Jay Smith did a video on this a couple of weeks ago, come to think about it. And he brought up, you guys know who that Mansour guy is from Speaker's Corner?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, the guy's he's a very intelligent, well-spoken, articulate man. And this is one of the arguments that he pinned Mansour down on as far as having a complete manuscript, not just the orality of it, but a complete manuscript. And Jay let him get away with saying that was from, I think it was like 740 something, if I'm not mistaken. I might be wrong on that. I'm willing to be wrong on that. But if you guys
orality doesn't prove the point. You can't prove a manuscript through orality.
I get that. I get that point because orality is not part of a manuscript. But he was saying that he had a complete manuscript that was dated within 100 years of Uthman.
Yeah, and he couldn't produce it, and he got busted. I know.
Okay. All right. So he's intelligent. Okay. All right. Well, okay. I think he's very. Let me just put it this way. I think he's very
able
well
to communicate. We'll give him.
Well, he's very well sourced too. He brings up a lot of facts. Now, whether or not those facts are true, that's a completely different discussion. All right, let's get back.
Doesn't appear as a freshman doctoral student.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. He's much has a higher level than that. All right. So has the Bible been corrupted? And the reason why they're forced to say this is because the Quran contradicts the Bible all over the place. So they have. This is an apologetic or a rescuing device that they have to come up and say the Bible has been changed. The Bible has been corrupted to the point where you can't recognize the message. But the Quran itself does not say that the Bible has been corrupted. As a matter of fact, the Quran says that if you have any doubt, go to the people of book. It talks about it's come to confirm with what they have in their hands. And then it talks about Muhammad being prophesied in the Bible. How are you going to find somebody prophesied up if the book itself has been corrupted? Why would you be going to that? But you guys have already said this. Why would you be going to that if it has been corrupted? And it also mentions the Torah, the Injil, and the Psalms. Now, that doesn't go to say that it lists the epistles that are found in the New Testament or the major and minor prophets in the Old Testament. However, it treats the Torah, or at least a lot of these arguments that we've seen. If you've seen some of the arguments that have been developed because was it 7:157 where it says Muhammad says that you will find me written in the Torah, in the Injil, and in the Zabur or whatever they call it, the Psalms. Well, if you're going to make that argument, in order to make that argument, they have gone to the Song of Solomon. The Song of Solomon isn't part of, and that's the dumbest. That's the dumbest place to go looking. And they've claimed Isaiah. They go to Isaiah 29. They go to Isaiah 42. And okay, that's actually, I wish I had a button that would do that to laugh at some of these claims that they make. And then it says go to the Psalms. Well, what do they do in the Psalms? Well, they are not the Psalms, the Gospels. What do they do?
John 14-16.
Yeah, they say the Holy Spirit right there. It's the Holy Spirit,
the Comforter.
The Holy Spirit is Muhammad. Now, what does the Bible say? The one thing, the unpardonable sin is
blasphemy of the Holy Spirit.
Right. So if you're calling Muhammad the Holy Spirit,
that's blasphemy.
That is blasphemy.
Well, I wouldn't want to be the one saying it. Let me put it that way.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay.
I would not want that.
Let's jump back over here. All right. So Muhammad claimed to be, I already said this, but claimed to be prophesied. The Bible has been credited. Which part, and this is the question I asked earlier. If the Bible has been corrupted, if you're going to say the Bible is corrupted, you tell me which parts have been corrupted I want a detailed analysis of each part. I want to know when it was corrupted, and I want to know by whom it was corrupted.
Well,
and also,
there's another problem
what evidence is there for this corruption other than you referring to saying, well, the Quran says something different, so therefore the Bible must be corrupted. I would say that the Quran itself is corrupted. The Quran itself can be demonstrated.
Well, the Quran testifies of the accuracy of the Bible.
But
the
wait,
entire Bible. It does it over and over again.
In order for something to be corrupted, it has to first be true.
Right.
How can the Quran be corrupt? It's not even true.
Okay, so but
exactly.
The thing with the Quran is that we can sit here and clearly and easily, I would say easily demonstrate that it's not true. And I have put this challenge out there, I don't know how many times, to people to come and debate whether or not the Quran is the word of God. And nobody, and when I say nobody, I mean nobody takes me up on that offer. And I'm just the kafir. What the heck do I know? So why are you so afraid to defend the Quran from somebody like me? Why would you have to? Here's the standard answer. The standard answer is okay. Well, if we're going to debate the Quran, that's fine. We're going to debate the Quran, but we also must. It would be fair to debate the Bible. Everywhere you go, that's all you do is debate the Bible. Nobody cares what your opinion of the Bible is anymore. You lie so many times about it.
Well, you face
defend the Quran.
If you're debating the Bible, if you're debating the Tanakh and the New Testament or Evangelion. The issue that you face is, if you're a Muslim trying to take this position, the problem you face is, what premise do you then have for trusting in the Quran? The Quran, it says clearly, and you would see in the Hadith that you have to look at these texts to prove that the Quran is true. So it's a very problematic space. It's something that I don't understand. I don't understand why a Muslim an apologist would take this position. I think it really hurts the case. Yes, you might not understand or agree with the text, but you can make the same point if you're taking a Muslim position that there are things in the Quran that you may not understand.
Well, what position could you come up with? I mean, if you're going to say that, let's just use a real quick example. In the Bible, it says that the daughter of Pharaoh drew Moses from the Nile. In the Quran, it says the wife of Pharaoh drew Moses from the Nile.
Asya, yeah.
Okay, so which one is it? Well, you have to turn around and say, well, Muhammad, of course, got it right, and he's come to confirm the Bible. So confirm also means correct the Bible where the Bible is in error. That's the rescuing device. And it's this is the level of desperation. Forget the anachronistic nature of the Quran. Forget all the stories from Gnostic Gospels in the Quran. This is the rescuing device that they come up with when they get just basic facts about the Bible wrong. The Bible's been corrupted. Well, show me where and when and by who and what evidence do you have for that? And the only evidence that they have for it, look at here. Here's the Quran. The Quran says something different. That's not evidence.
And my question, what I would bring up is, what does corruption mean? Like, you would have to make a standard of proving a corruption. So what is...
I'm getting into that in the next slide. The next slide, Isa. The next slide. Let me get to the next slide, and then we'll...
Sorry, I keep jumping ahead.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I appreciate your enthusiasm here to get into this. All right, so the Bible has been corrupted. So let's take a look at the New Testament. This is the argument that they make, but let's take a look and see what we actually have. If you're going to say that the New Testament has been corrupted, Jesus never died on a cross or any nonsense like that, here's what we do have. We have over 5,600 Greek new manuscripts alone. When you include manuscripts that are written in Latin, Syriac, Aramaic, or Coptic, that number explodes to over 25,000. 25,000 manuscripts. The Bible, the New Testament itself, has 138,020 words. I looked it up. Why? Because I have no wife, but that's how many words it has. And of those words, you have over 400,000 variants. Now, when we talk about a variant is not a corruption. A variant is maybe a scribal mistake. A variant can be an insertion of a word, an omission of a word, a misspelling of a word. These are variants. And the reason why we have so many variants is because we have so many manuscripts. But when we look at these variants themselves, it's Daniel Wallace, who's probably the foremost expert on textual criticism of the New Testament, especially the Greek manuscripts, has said that 99.75% of all of these variants that we find within the New Testament are neither viable. What's the word? Another word that he uses? Viable,
meaningful.
There we go. Thank you. Yes, meaningful, meaning that they have no impact on the meaning of the text whatsoever. Nothing. And then when you look at that, the ones that are meaningful and viable, if I would have just done that, there they are. None of them have any impact on the core teachings of the church. Now, when I say core teachings of the church, this is the point that is so bloody important. I've been hanging around Dominic too long. This is what's so bloody important, Dominic, is that you have to have corruption. When we talk about corruption on the scale of where you're changing the entire gospel message, which is death, deity, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. You don't find that. You can't find that in any of the manuscripts or any of the variants. You have a misspelling of John. They didn't even have a Webster's dictionary at the time, folks.
But so you do find it in the Quran.
Okay, that's don't get me sidetracked here because I'm on a roll. So what I'm saying is that out of all of these variants, you have no impact on the core text. And we're looking at this excuse that, well, Paul corrupted the scripture. Shut your pie hole. You read the book of Acts, for crying out loud. Here you have Peter, John going to the temple, healing this lame man at the gate. This is even before Paul even thinks about corrupting the New Testament or saying anything to the Christians. They go to the temple and they proclaim the gospel of Jesus Christ within 50 days of the resurrection, guys. That's the chronology of the book of Acts, which Luke wrote, which had nothing to do with Paul. If you start thinking about this desperate attempt to say that the Bible has been corrupted, anybody that does serious scholarship clearly recognize how ridiculous and desperate this is. There's nobody that does any type of textual criticism, anybody that does any type of scholarship would make this claim that the biblical, even Bart Ehrman, where's the clown's book at right here? Even Bart Ehrman in his book, Misquoting Jesus. If you go back here on...
To the very back, page right 212, I think.
252.
252, that's what it was.
252, exactly. It says, Bruce Metzger is one of the great scholars of modern times, and I dedicated this book because he was both my inspiration for going into textual criticism and the person who trained me in the field. I have nothing but respect and admiration for him. And even though we may disagree on important religious questions, he is firmly committed Christian and I am not. We are in complete agreement. There we go. Somebody else that went in and got it. We are in complete agreement on a number of very important historical and textual questions. If he and I were put into a room, this is the point. If he and I were put into a room and asked to hammer out the consensus statement on what we think the original text of the New Testament probably looked like, there would be very few points of disagreement, maybe 1 or 2 dozen places out of many thousands. That's Bart Ehrman. May Allah be, what is the word I'm looking for? May Allah be...
Please be upon him.
Whatever he is. Yeah.
You should have also read where, I don't know if you said the part where it's talking about the position I argue for in Misquoting Jesus, and I'm actually quoting from it as well, does not actually stand at odds with Professor Metzger's position that the essential Christian beliefs are not affected by textual variants in the manuscript tradition of the New Testament. That's
page 212?
That's on page, no, that's page 252 as well.
Oh, okay.
You just had to keep reading.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking I was going to bore people, but yeah, but even may Allah be pleased with him. There we go. Bart Ehrman, may Allah be pleased with him. I think I used to have a rule on this show that we had to say that, and then I thought we'd get away with it, get away from it. Anyway, the bottom line is in order to claim this corruption, that the Bible has been corrupted, where the complete message of Jesus Christ has been corrupted, and we all have it wrong, is so patently absurd. And I'm amazed that there are serious Islamic scholars that still try to make it. It really is alarming to think that there are people out there that would completely ignore the historical methodology in which we can look at the New Testament, the textual criticism that was put into it, and still come away and say, well, it's been corrupted to the point where we can't tell what the original texts were. Is absolutely it's insanity is what it is. The world upside down.
Could I say something to that real quick as well to add on top of that? No,
Of course you can. Go ahead. I'm just playing.
No, you're good. So to add to what you're saying, this is also what you gave the statistics before with 99.75 and then a 0.25 cents, and this is actually what scholars say. For the vast majority of textual variants, there is simply no difficulty determining the original wording. 99% of all textual problems are easily resolved by comparing the external and internal evidence, and even a good portion of the remaining less than 1% that are meaningful and viable can be resolved with a great deal of confidence by a careful comparison of the external and internal evidence. Here's the kicker. To argue for large-scale skepticism about a very small portion of the text is a careless overstatement. In other words, what he's saying is that we can definitely know for certain what the original wordings are of the New Testament. This is just the New Testament alone. And to say that because, like, this is what Muslims do, for anybody to say that we can't trust it, it's been corrupted, the scholars in textual criticism even says that that is a careless overstatement, period. When you compare external and internal evidence together, we can know what the original wording says. There's no corruption. We have the original core doctrines, which is, and even Bart Ehrman was questioned on this since you brought him up. He was talking about the Trinity, the crucifixion, and the resurrection of Jesus Christ as some of the core doctrines. And even he agrees that none of those core essential Christian doctrines are affected by any textual variant. So therefore, even today, you still have Christianity that was taught by Jesus, taught during the time of Jesus and the apostles from the beginning.
Right. And so the term is careless overstatement. Careless overstatement.
Yeah.
Kind of like the statement we would expect. Here it is. Are you ready for this? This is the careless overstatement that we would expect from somebody that is a freshman doctoral student. In other words, that's exactly the exact type of statement that would be made. And I like that characterization. Careless overstatement. I have to remember that one.
Yeah. And Eric, I wanted to touch on that too. Careless overstatement. Careless. They are careless to tell the truth about the documents that we have of the New Testament. They're careless, right? They don't care to tell the truth about the documentation that we do have. Thank you.
Yeah, to me, it's more dishonesty. And I was thinking how I would, when I got to this part, how I was going to work, because I want to be careful how I word things, or more careful than what I used to be anyway. But when I think of the arguments that are put forth by these Dawagandists and the demonstrable dishonesty that is employed by them, you have to think, are there people out there that are really that dishonest or willing to be that dishonest in representing Christianity, representing our text, or trying to, provide some type of apologetic against it? And I have said this on the show before, and I am not backing away from the statement. I think that there is some type of demonic possession or blindness that has to exist in one's heart and one's soul in order to continue to use this level of dishonesty when trying to provide some type of criticism of Christianity. You cannot like Christianity, but to say that the text has been corrupted based on what Hunter was just saying and based on what we know historically, it's absolutely absurd. But yet,
it's supernatural.
Here is the deal. These people are literally fulfilling biblical prophecy, because it does say in 2 Thessalonians 2 from 9 to 12 that God will send these people a strong delusion that they'll believe the lie, and they're believing it. We're seeing it happen live, guys.
That is a great point. I never considered that passage. What is that? 2 Thessalonians 2 what?
Chapter 2, verses 9 through 12.
9 through 12. Yeah, I've heard those verses.
Well, what's funny?
I'm going to put that in my Eric Second for Combat kit, by the way.
Can you guys hear me?
No,
yes,
can't hear you.
Okay.
No, we can't hear you.
So what's funny? Okay. Is that you brought up the 2 Thessalonians, but think about this: the verse that they claim, one of the verses that they claim their prophet is in Isaiah, where it says about, you will come up to a man who cannot read from the scroll.
29:12.
He cannot read from the scroll, or one who can read, and they will say, "I cannot read because it's sealed." Okay, Jesus actually brings this up to condemn people because that verse is condemnation. Because even if they can read the text, they will say it's sealed to them because it is sealed to them. They cannot comprehend it. They cannot understand it. Not only that, but think about it. What did we hear from the Kenny crew? They totally and completely denied their scripture. Totally and completely denied it. Just threw it out. He actually says, well, if I come to something that I disagree with, I just, I don't pay it. No, never mind. I just move past it. You don't have to be an extremist and believe everything that it says. Come on. You know what I mean?
If it is
and what I hope
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I'm just finished up. What I hope to demonstrate is we don't do that with our Bible. We read the whole thing and we're like, yep, that's pretty much what happened. David was a super duper badass paratrooper, and he was also a lech and a total just not good person. You know what I mean?
Right.
He did horrible things. You know?
Yeah, the foreskin. I think the foreskin thing's kind of scarring me, so we're just gonna kind of tiptoe.
Sorry,
All right, let me go to one more thing here, and we'll call it. Well, we still got some time here. All right.
You mind if I give one comment on that?
Go ahead.
About the corrupted text situation, because I was trying to say something quick about that. The idea is, if we're going to argue for a corruption, you first would have to have a text that you would say is the true text to claim that there is a corruption. And I think that's a problem. I don't understand why a Muslim apologist takes this position. I get him that certain texts may not agree with you, so you have to take another theological route. I think if I were to argue for taking a Muslim apologist position, I would say, well, God understands these texts. We don't understand them. And in a certain way, there might be some metaphorical reading of the text, and that's how they can all collaborate and resonate with each other. I would take more of that kind of position, even if, you might not get the 100% soundness. It's a far better position than this position of corruption.
Well,
because
any position of corruption denies the Quran by itself. So
I agree.
Because the Quran turns right back around and it confirms the Torah and the Gospel. So
if you call the Bible corrupt in any manner, you have just called Allah a liar.
Yep.
So, and you've said the Quran is stupid. So if you can't have it both ways, is what you got to throw it back on them immediately. Really, I think you just have to go there. I don't know why anybody plays the game. Let's go back to the Quran. What does the Quran say about the trustworthiness of the Bible? I think you have to go straight there instead of waiting for them to prove it.
The Hadith supports it too. But my position too, which was the second part of the argument, is if we're saying that the text is corrupt, how do we argue it's corrupt? We have to have a standard of corruption. So first, if we're going to argue that something is corrupt, then I guess we'd have to have an original text to say, here's your true original text that exists. And all the other texts deviated from that. I hear people bring up the gospel, but that's not really a succinct text. That's one narrative, and a lot of people say that it was manufactured maybe in the 15th century. I mean, that's not a good argument. So I'm like, what argument are you going to use to say here is? And so I would say, what is our argument for corruption? We'd say, okay, there needs to be an original text that exists. We need to argue that there's a deviation from that text. We would have to then argue also that if we have this true text, the veracity of this text. There's so many problems of trying to prove corruption. You could just say the word corruption over and over again, but it's meaningless unless you have some kind of standard. This is why words are important.
Well, here's how they get past that. Let me just explain real quick how they get past it, because we don't have much time left. This is how they get past that corruption. When we say, okay, tell me when, where, by whom, and how the text was corruption. When you look at these Dawagandists, when they go ahead and they start criticizing, for an example, or justifying some of the things that we find that are in the Quran that contradict what we find in the Bible. For an example, the easiest one is the crucifixion. And I even think I have that up here. They will go to known heretical Gnostic sources. Let me repeat that. Known heretical late Gnostic sources in order to justify what we have in the Quran. When we look at Quran 4:157, where it talks about Christ not even being crucified, they killed him not. Okay, when they say that, we know where that story came from. And the reason why we know where that story came from is, number one, we have the second great treatise of Seth. We have copies of it from the Nag Hammadi library. But the other thing is if you look at their tafsir on these things, all of these commentaries that these guys, to include Ibn Abbas, Ibn Kathir, all Jalalain, they all quote almost directly from the second great treatise of Seth. So we know where what they're quoting for. So what they're doing is they're saying, okay, Christ was never crucified. Why? Because we know from this source right here that contradicts the New Testament sources. So what they're doing is they're using known heretical sources to try to support what the Quran teaches. And that's exactly what you would find in somebody preaching this message from 7th century Arabia. Somebody that heard it and said, oh, well, that sounds really good. Let's go ahead and use that. Oh, Jesus made clay birds. Oh, let's go ahead and use that. Oh, Jesus spoke from the cradle. Oh, that sounds great. Let's go use that. Oh, these guys would stayed in this cave for 300 years. Oh, that sounds like a great idea. Let's use. So all of these things come from pre-existent known Gnostic, Syriac, and Talmudic sources. It's just the things that Muhammad. So when we start looking at the Quran, we can easily demonstrate that the Quran is false. And so all these charges of corruption, textual corruption within the Bible completely fall apart when they make this excuse, well, the Quran came to correct the Bible. It's absolutely not true.
Well, the guy that championed the argument said that if he were wrong, that may he be struck down and be quieted. Guess what?
Right, yeah. And what had happened to him?
Guess what happened?
He had a stroke.
Yes. He had a stroke and he couldn't talk for the last 10 years of his life.
Yeah, I'm not mocking him as a stroke, but when you look at somebody getting what they demand from God, knowing that this guy blasphemed Jesus in so many different ways, that it's hard to get me to feel sorry. What are you talking about here, Rod?
Isn't that exactly what happened to Mo, though? Think about it.
Yeah,
he said,
that's
I'm
right.
a false prophet. Allah will rip out my aorta. What did he say in the end? It feels like Allah is ripping out my aorta.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly how he died, the poison. All right, we're at the 6 o'clock hour, folks. I try to stay truthful to this, despite the mountain of more stuff I got. Maybe we should continue this next week.
Don't forget the cold.
Yeah, I won't forget your cold clothes. What I was going to say. Now, you just, why do you do this to me every week?
I'll tell you this. You're going to laugh when you see this today.
You want to continue it next week?
Yeah, let's go ahead and continue it next week. Let me just say this. I am going to be out Memorial Day weekend and the following week. So there's going to be 2 weekends in a row that I'm going to be out. Now, if somebody wants to step up and host the show, I'll be more than happy to give them, my passcodes, key code. Well, maybe not the password key, but I'll be happy to set you up and get you rolling on the show if you want to do that. But if not, that's fine. We can take a 2-week vacation break from this. But I think we'll come back to this next week. Maybe spend a little more time, because I have all kinds of other objections here that have been raised, and I want to give it more due diligence and talk about what we find. Because this next one, Christians worship 3 gods and are polytheists. Really? Yeah, that sounds like some of the Romans used to say that we used to drink. We were cannibals too. Yeah. All right. Everybody in chat that was here today, God bless you. Thank you so much for coming on. Everybody that here's on the panel, our new friend, Hunter Bailey, thank you everybody for coming on and sharing your Sunday afternoon with us. Because I know you could be doing all kinds of other things, like getting your wife to mow glass on Mother's Day, or other important things that I managed to do. God bless you all, and we'll see you next week here on the Crossing.
God bless.
Advanced, student, and specialist. That the standard narrative has holes. That's what
that the Muslims were rioting against one another. And as much as we don't want to face the fact, the Muslims were lying sometimes. They were fabricating, they were embellishing, and that might be hard to accept, but that is a reality.